Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm glad so many turned up after yesterday's parties. It's very early, I've noticed myself. So I'm going to talk about a comparative forensic analysis of the WinVote voting machine. And I brought you one copy of this thing, which was given to me by an unnamed source maybe 2 years ago. And I kind of became slightly, I had like 5 minutes of fame because I hacked this machine last year at DEF CON. And I also would like to do some advertisement because we have a voting village again at DEF CON this year. So if you want to play around and hack those machines, you're more than invited. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I'd like to say is actually, I would like to kind of take a little bit of a helicopter view on elections. And the Declaration for Human Rights in Article 21.3 actually states that a genuine and credible election is a human right. And it says literally, the will of the people shall be on the basis of authority of government. Okay, that's good. This will shall be expressed in periodic and genuine elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage and shall be held by secret or equivalent voting procedures. The part with the equivalent voting procedures was added because in Switzerland, there are actually some people who still vote by raising their hand on a marketplace that cannot be called really secret. So that's called equivalent free voting procedure. Okay, so let's just kind of think about what role does technology in all of this play. When you add technology to the voting process, you clearly increase its attack surface, right? And there are two big problems with this. The one problem is what we always do at Black Hat and DEF CON, that is cybersecurity and trying to hack in, right? So when you have a vulnerability in your system, people might actually use it to exploit it and try to hack it, change votes on the machines. That's a real threat. But the other threat is equally important and equally dangerous. And this is the threat of an alleged cyber attack, where people claim that there was a cyber attack when there actually wasn't one. And so what I have done in my talk, or in this presentation, what I will be doing is actually look at this machine, and we're going to kind of hack it a little bit, and we did a little bit of forensics on it, and then I'll tell you what we found about it. But the main conclusion actually of this talk will be that, if somebody claims this machine was hacked, you actually do not have a good mechanism to say, like, hold on, that's not true, it wasn't hacked. So let's look at the United States and the use of technology in the United States for the 2018 midterm election, which is just around the corner. You see that many states actually use some form of technology, and I think the most well-known technology, these are optical scan machines, where you kind of fill out your ballot with a little oval and you put it into a machine that scans it and interprets it. Or there are DRE machines, just like this one. And just to kind of make really 100% clear, this one is decommissioned. I have never committed any felony, although there's a little sticker on the back that says it's a class 5 felony to tamper with this machine. Okay, so let's look at the WinVote voting machine a little bit more closely. The WinVote voting machine, for those who can't see it, is just a normal voting machine. Okay, they're going to pan maybe the camera. If you want to take pictures of it, be welcome after the presentation. It has a little ballot printer here, but this printer is not used for every voter to print out what the voter voted. It is actually only used 2 times in an election. At the very beginning, where printout comes out and all of the tallies are 0, hopefully. And at the end of polling day, when the printout should say what the result was of all of the votes collected on this machine. So let's go back to the slides. So a few facts about this voting machine. The voting machine was used pervasively in Virginia. It is exactly this model and 4,000 like it. It's about 4,000 polling places, 4,000 units I think were used, but this is just a guesstimate. It could have been much, much more. And for my forensic study, I had access to this machine, but there's very little to go on. And if you look for irregularities on election machines, It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, except that you don't know exactly what a needle looks like, and you only have like partial access to the haystack. So I asked some of my friends, because the source where I got this machine from, the source actually gave away other machines. So I asked those people, hey, can I please get access to your machine? Or maybe can you give me an image, a forensic image of the hard drive so that I can forensically analyze them? And these machines actually have 2 disks in them. There's a small disk, and these are SSD disks. Keep in mind that this machine was built in 2003, 2004, 2002, plus minus, not sure exactly when. Okay. So, and it has a large disk that runs the operating system. And here on the right, on the left of the slide, on my right, you can see a capture of the original thing, which it says Microsoft Windows XP Embedded version 2002. And unfortunately, they did not install any security updates on these machines. That means the machines are vulnerable to all kinds of attacks and vulnerabilities that were collected since 2003. Okay, so that's not very good. The other thing is there are lots of open ports on that system, and it turns out that if you want to kind of use this old buffer overflow for our RCP, then you can just try it out. And I have done it, and I have of course prepared it, and I logged this machine around the entire world to come here to actually just hack it. And so another problem with this machine is that it has wireless turned on all the time. And having wireless turned on is very good, because if you're a polling worker and you have to configure more than one machine, you just configure one master machine and you kind of print return, and off the information goes, and it configures all of the machine. But you have to kind of make sure that it's usable. And in order to kind of make sure it's usable, to connect these machines to the wireless network, as every machine has its own wireless node, you have to type in a password. And this password is ABCDE. It's not a very secure password. And I guess password crackers, and it uses only WEP secure authentication, so it's not very good, right? So I have just kind of made a very tiny script where I start the Metasploit framework, load all of the information, picking the right vulnerability, and just kind of hack the system. And with a little luck, it says now, it should say now, Windows XP. No way. That's the first time ever. Really? This was not intended. I wanted to do this quick. Okay. Okay, so I see this machine. Okay, so this is the IP address of the voting machine, and I don't know why it doesn't work. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to take this offline because I just don't have enough time to kind of debug it now. We have to probably restart the machine. Really embarrassing. I wanted to kind of really say like, oh my goodness, is that it? Yeah, that would have been it. Okay, so in Virginia, in 2015, people became a bit cold feet with this machine. So keep in mind, it was in use from 2004 to 2014. So this machine was used for one presidential election for Bush and 2 times Obama. And they kind of commissioned some report from the Virginia Information Technology Agency, and they kind of said like, it's a piece of crap. I'm sorry. So let's decommission it. And so it's decommissioned. So when I hacked it last year at DEF CON, I thought like, may God, it's really easy to kind of show an exploit, but did it really have any effects? Did other people do it? And so this is actually what this talk is about. And I wanted to kind of know, really, did someone interfere with the operations of this machine? So the first thing you do is you kind of try to boot up Kali and try to see like, what can you get? It's more difficult than it actually appeared. So at the end, it was much easier to kind of just rip out the drives and make forensic images. And that's exactly what I've done. So I've collected the forensic images of all of these 8 machines, and I used autopsy It's a basic forensic tool to kind of study what I find. Now, some people might say like autopsy is like this is just the general you can do it all, but anyway, so if you can't, I'm not sure exactly what kind of needle in the haystack I'm looking for. So this is actually a very, very good tool to show you that there is some irregularities, but we don't actually know exactly where they come from and what the explanations is. And by the way, the irregularities I'm showing you here that I've identified, I have no idea, where they come from, and I didn't go any deeper. So I think one should really go the next level if you really want to know if that was something bad or if it's just something that happened accidentally. So these machines were decommissioned 2014-15. So we don't actually have any memory access. We can't study and forensically do the memory. There's just nothing there. And since it's Windows XP, at that time, there are no logs of people actually connecting wirelessly to the machine, which is very difficult if you want to know if somebody wirelessly connects to the machine. So that you see the haystack, actually there are big holes in it. Then also, we looked at the security event logs and all of these things. So there are many log files that were actually there, like the event logs, but security was always empty. So I have no idea. Was it because, the vendor just kind of configured it so that nothing is written? Who knows? Okay, so I have all of these 8 images and I've imported them into Autopsy. And that's a little bit like what it looks like, right? You have like, and thanks to Josh, Noel, Jeremy, and all of the people who kind of gave me their disks. And you see, like you have a normal window. Okay, so when you do a forensic analysis, you really have to kind of be clear about the objectives. Otherwise, you just don't know exactly where you're walking or what you're trying to find. The overall objective is clearly that somebody interfere with the operations of the machine. But what I also wanted to know is, that's number one. Did somebody exploit all of these vulnerabilities? Did somebody actually do something bad and install some rootkits, malware on it? We've seen in the Netherlands a few years ago that Rob Gonggrijp showed how to use a voting machine for playing chess. Alex Haldeman from University of Michigan showed how to play Pac-Man together with Ed Felton from Princeton. And there are a couple of questions you can ask. So let's just kind of go into it and see what I found. So the first impression, okay, so there's in Autopsy, there's a little folder and says like, there's strange documents, yes. Okay, so you can't really see it in the back of the room, but the blue highlighted line here is a Chinese name which says .mpeg3.lnk. And you wonder, what does an MPEG-3 file have to do on a voting machine? And I was actually curious what this sounds like. So I hope that the sound works. No, it's not on the speakers, unfortunately. Maybe the audio guys can take the signal from the HDMI. Okay, so there's a Chinese song that was actually ripped with this machine. Okay, so when you actually go and you kind of look further, you actually see there are traces of ripping software. There's actually on 4 of my machines, not all of them, there were actually, there's software installed to broadcast MPEG-3s. And when I just looked at my machine first and I said like, hey, that's weird. Did somebody really use the voting machine to rip MPEG-3s in 2004? That's really bizarre. And then broadcast it to the internet, that's even more weird. But once you do the comparative analysis, you actually see that somebody must have done this before they actually kind of finished the image, which they then copied on the drives that they then put into the voting machines. But still, it's kind of strange that there are MPEG-3 files like this on the voting machine. Then I went a bit more seriously and I looked at the concrete days of elections, okay? So here's the presidential election where Obama was elected November 6, 2012. And that's a little bit what you see when you kind of go into the timeline. And you see there's lots of events happening. So these are basically all of the events that happened during election day on all of my 8 machines. And keep in mind, again, it's only 8 machines. There are another 3,992 machines out there, which I haven't looked at. So again, it's the needle in the haystack. All right. And you see that there was a lot of events. For some reason, these machines were configured to run on Pacific time. although they were used in Virginia, which kind of is a bit difficult because you have to offset the times by 3 hours. But here at 00, that's actually, where all of the machines were initialized. You see that some files were created to start the election, so that looked all quite normal. Okay, so then here this thing is it basically records all of the devices that were plugged into the machine. USB devices, because there's a little USB thing where it actually collects the votes, and then we have lots of activities here during the day. I think there was another machine started. But when you go through all of the files, all looks pretty reasonable, okay? So they all kind of just work in their own directory, which is like the voting directory, and there's like not double writing, it all looks pretty reasonable. Well, then I went to the 2013 election, which was the gubernatorial election in Virginia. Okay, so here you can see, you can't really see it, but there's something happened here between 4:44 and 4:45. Maybe there were about 60 on one of my machines. So 7 machines of my 8 machines were used for this election. And on one of the machine, 60 files changed in the Windows system directory. Okay, so what does that mean? I don't really know. Because it might be completely harmless. The system tried to update something. They were all flagged as modified. And also, the strange thing is also the WinVote itself was flagged as modified. But I've checked actually the files themselves. They are actually all identical. So I do not know where this modification comes from. But during the election day, so it was about 4 o'clock, so that's like in the evening. So that happens after the poll has opened and before the poll closed. Somebody inserted some more USB things into the slots of the voting machine. Okay, so that is. That's really bizarre. So, and I only saw it on one of the machines. So I have no idea. So the vulnerabilities, so I can only point out, when you do this forensic analysis, you can only point out there's some strange stuff, but a good interpretation of it is, of course, something that has to follow. And here's a list of all of the different elections that I went through. So there's, for example, most of those elections actually look good, except the one in 2013. In 2005, also something really funny happened, because there's actually an old modem in these machines. And for some reason, so 5 of my machines were used in the gubernatorial election in 2005. And 3 of these WinVote machines actually, on election day, tried to dial out on the modem line. I don't know, maybe it was to kind of update their security patches. One machine, unfortunately, dialed the wrong number and didn't connect, and the other 2 were successful. Okay, what does that mean? I have no idea. It's just kind of a strange observation. So coming back to my original point, that when you have technology in the voting process, you set yourself up for cyber attacks, but you also set yourself up for alleged cyber attacks. So a forensic analysis of those drives cannot really tell us if hacking has taken place or it has not. And that's just, at least not for those machines because of the logs, but yeah, that's just this. It's really, really difficult. So the question really is, how do we get out of this? And so the way how we get out of this is, I think we have to kind of remember that our elections need to produce some kind of evidence. And the only evidence that I had for the WinVote in these prior elections are those drives in those machines. So if the machine doesn't actually print out any paper, that's the only evidence we have. And that's just not very good evidence. Okay, so let's just kind of switch state for one moment and go from Virginia to Colorado. So in Colorado, we have, for the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton got about 1.338 million votes and Donald J. Trump got 1.2 million votes. There was a clear difference between those two, about 130,000 votes. Okay, so, if these machines were not used in that election, these machines were decommissioned in 2014, they were not used at all in the 2016 election. But let's think about evidence, right? So if a machine like this were actually to be used, then, we don't actually have any way to kind of check, for is that margin okay or not? But since about 2012, we have very, very good techniques of actually tackling this. So my question really is like, what is better evidence? The paper ballots or those drives of those WinVote voting machines? So I hope I've convinced you that the right one is not, so that the voting machine drives is not good evidence. So the paper evidence is much, much better. So what you really can do is you can do a post-election audit on those kind of paper ballots. And those kind of post-election audits are really, really, it's a really good mean in order to generate trust and confidence in the election result. Because when you draw and look at the evidence in a statistical way, not the drives, they're not good enough, but the paper, you actually kind of can gain confidence in that the election result was correct. And there's a technique which was pioneered by Philip Stark, professor at Berkeley, and his colleague Linneman. And they've developed a technique which is called risk-limiting audits. And that basically requires that you have a secure paper trail. And once you have a secure paper trail, it's much better than to have an insecure SSD trail. And so what you actually do is you draw a random sample of a certain size, you kind of check if the sample is okay. If the sample is okay, you're good. If not, the system or the process starts auto-correcting at the end. If there's a lot of evidence of, something is wrong, there's a mismatch between the paper trail and the audience, then the paper trail and the evidence, then you have to do a recount, but the method will actually prompt you to do this. So it's a very good method. So the question is, how many ballots do you actually have to draw? And I think this is very eye-opening for me, that it's actually not very many. So on the left, you see the tool that Philip Stark actually produced that computes the size of the sample that you would have to kind of draw. And I have just put in the candidates for the election in Colorado, and the number of ballots nationwide that you have to kind of draw in order to kind of gain confidence in the correctness of the election result. It's 142. So statewide, you have to draw 142 ballots, and once you do that, then you can be 95% sure that the election result is correct. If you only use DAE machines that do not produce any paper evidence, then you don't have this option. And so the really, really important point I want to make is that it is really, really important, if you want to kind of convince people that this is a genuine election, that you actually do those kind of post-election audits. And I have put in a map of all of the states in the United States that actually kind of, worry about auditing a little bit. And you see the state of Colorado is actually the only one that actually has implemented that technique. And that's why it's black, and the rest of the states are lacking slightly behind. Okay, and I would also like to say, coming back to my original point, there are still 4 or 5 states in the United States for the midterm election that use machines, not like those WinVote machines that connect and have a wireless access point. No, there are machines that don't produce any paper evidence. And those states are Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, Delaware, and New Jersey. And that is really, I hope that with this talk I've convinced you guys that actually paper is a good way to do it. I'm a computer scientist. So let me just say my conclusion, and I have only one conclusion, and that is use paper and do your audits. That's the most important part. Thank you. Do you have questions? Yes?
Is the paper verified with the vote themselves saying, yes, that's how I voted?
That's the paper needs to be verified by the voter. It needs to be voter verified. And so there's right now in West Virginia, I'm not sure if you have read this, but West Virginia is trying to kind of pilot a system for mobile phone voting. And they claim that also produces paper, but people, wherever they are, type something on their phone and then it prints something out. That is not the paper that you want. You want exactly what you said. You want to have it voter verified. It needs to kind of reflect the intent of the voter, and the voter has to kind of agree to this. So do we have...
Want to cross the hall to the rep room.
Okay, so we go to the rep room if you're interested and have more questions. Thank you.